Hello everyone and welcome to Food Tank's webinar series. This is Sarah Small and I'm Food Tank's Global Events Director. I'm really excited about today's webinar with Leo Gorman. He's the farm manager at Grow Dat Youth Farm, a 2-acre market farm whose mission is to nurture a diverse group of young leaders to the meaningful work of growing food. Today, Leo will be presenting on the intersection between youth leadership, sustainable agriculture, and the New Orleans food system through the case study of Grow Dat Youth Farm. This webinar will be recorded and posted on foodtank.com afterwards. You can also follow along and participate using hashtag FoodTank on Twitter. And please do submit your questions using the questions chat box in your control panel, or you can email me, sarah@foodtank.com. So without further ado, Leo, it's really great to have you here today, and I'm excited to hear your presentation. I will give you the floor now.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sarah, and thank you and Danielle and all the team at Food Tank. We are super supportive of y'all's work and really appreciate the opportunity to present on this great platform. Greetings, everyone. My name is Leo Gorman. I'm farm manager at Grow Dat Youth Farm in New Orleans, Louisiana, and it's a pleasure to be with you. And I think for the next, this presentation will be around 20 minutes, and it's going to be an overview of the history of our organization and kind of a case study of how we approach youth leadership development through the vehicle of food justice, and sustainable agriculture. And if you have any questions at the end, I'm going to try to not do too much reading from the slides so that we can just have a more kind of engaging conversation. But I'm happy to share these slides with you after the webinar if you choose, but my contact will be up at the end. So I'm going to go to our first slide. As Sarah mentioned, Grow Dat's mission is to nurture a diverse group of young leaders through the meaningful work of growing food, and we're doing this in the context of Southeast Louisiana and in the context of a post-Katrina New Orleans. We're approaching the 10th anniversary, as many of you all are familiar with, and it's a big deal, and there's been a lot of accomplishments in the last 10 years on a lot of fronts, and there are still a lot of challenges. And I'll talk a little bit about how those challenges intersect with our work and how we've worked with other partners in the city and in the region to help address them, and realizing that there's a long way to go, and that I think our work, as well as the work of many of you all in the organizations, this is life work. The work around supporting young people, of dismantling oppressive systems, and building resilient economies and communities. And that's something that we're trying to do here. As you can see in this slide, our vision is we are working towards a vibrant New Orleans where young people and adults are transforming their communities, their physical environments around them, through what I like to call the vehicle of sustainable agriculture. So, in a nutshell, Grow Dat is a youth leadership training project through the means, through the vehicle, through the lens of food, growing food, talking about food, the inequities in the food system, and the kind of community driven ideas around how to address those challenges. A little history about our project. It really was a kind of brainchild of our founder and director, Johanna Gilligan, who I went to college with at Tulane. So I arrived in New Orleans in 1996, graduated in 2000. I lived in Latin America for a while, came back, and this whole time I was in contact with Johanna, and she had been working with a number of food-based organizations here. And Katrina happens. I wasn't living here at the time, but then I came back in 2007, and she was here. And some of the conversations that were emerging from kind of our networks and the larger New Orleans community were on a number of fronts in relationship to food and employment. So one of the main ones was similar to before to Katrina, there was very little, and this is not unique to New Orleans, there's very few opportunities for dignified, decent paying work for young people in the city. And the ones that do exist are oftentimes in the fast food industry. And Johanna was seeing that a lot of the young people she was mentoring and working with, their only options that they were finding were through those jobs. Meanwhile, food access was a major challenge the city was facing, especially in historically disenfranchised African American, Vietnamese neighborhoods in the city. And so this idea was not born of ourselves per se. It was born of kind of the situation that we were hearing from partners and looking at other projects that had success elsewhere in the country. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But we always hold up the organizations and the people both within New Orleans and outside of New Orleans. So there are many countless community gardeners and mentors that we've had both in the cooking realm, the growing realm, and the food justice realm. Outside of New Orleans, we've been very much influenced and thankful to be part of learning from the Food Project in Boston, Urban Roots in Austin, and others. These are youth farms that we've modeled a lot of our pedagogy on. So this project really started to take form in 2010, 2011 in a very strong partnership with Tulane University, specifically their School of Architecture. And after the storm, the School of Architecture saw the need for design build related to community needs. And they formed a really amazing project called the Tulane City Center, which still operates today. And I'm forgetting what their website is, but you can, if you want to check out other projects they do around town, you can do that. Tulane City Center. And so we partnered with them to start thinking about the concept of this project in terms of the space, actually. And as we were doing that, we piloted the curriculum in 2011. If you can see on the slide there, the second portion there, where we partnered with one school and we hired 12 or 11 young people and farmed on a quarter acre at the Holly Grove Market and Farm, which was a project that started in conjunction with kind of the emerging needs kind of in the food system after Katrina as well. And so from there we were really kind of testing the curriculum and seeing how it was going to kind of translate to our work. And we had a successful year that year. In 2012, we moved into our current farm site in City Park. So we have a really amazing opportunity to be able to do sustainable urban agriculture within a city. And finding land, as many of you all know, is a big task. And City Park is a public park within Orleans Parish, and we have a great partnership with them. We are on 7 acres of land, and we have a campus that is made out of shipping containers, repurposed shipping containers, that the Tulane City Center grad students and their professors, in conjunction with young people and staff, designed, and they did a lot of the labor. And it was a great partnership because they were able to get their graduate school education through design build and practicum. And so they were, that was part of their schooling, while we were also able to benefit from, their hard work and expertise. So I won't go through each of these phases, but as you can see on the right, each year it was kind of a phased approach where we grow our program in terms of partner schools, young people, the acreage that we're farming on, and I'll go in a little bit into how we earmark what we grow for market and then also donation and subsidized sale. So I'll go over, we've got 3 organizational goals, and they basically break down into youth leadership development, food production, sustainable food production, and kind of leadership kind of within the organization and kind of radiating out and connecting folks. Similar in some ways to Food Tank, but kind of maybe at a more local level. So our first goal is to engage youth in personal transformation through farm work that enhances their capacity to positively contribute to society. A very lofty goal. But I like to say to people that first, a lot of people think, oh, you're a farmer training organization. But similar to Food Project and others, it's not a 4-H or a kind of a professional like tracking organization where we're doing professional development or professional tracking for gardeners or farmers or even horticulturalists. The concept is sustainable agriculture and growing food as the vehicle in which young people are learning a lot of the skills, not just knowledge, but real skills that are crucial in our modern world around communicating well, around resolving conflict, around working in a team, around troubleshooting problems, hard work, entrepreneurial kind of creativity, and these all, as many of you all know, and probably your own work, these are, food and agriculture is such a beautiful and wonderful lens to explore these concepts. And I'll go to the next slide. These are the main activities to achieve that goal. Our core of our organization really is our leadership program, and that is a 20-week program that runs from January to June. In South Louisiana, is different than many northern growers and elsewhere, kind of more temperate climates. We can grow year-round here. However, the most marketable crops we're growing kind of October to June. So it's July right now. I'm like cover cropping as we speak, and this is our off season. Even though we could be growing, it's just not as economical. But that also allows us to pair our growing cycle with our leadership program. So the leadership program runs from January to June, 20 weeks. Young people are coming here 2 days a week after school on Thursday and Friday in the afternoons, and then on Saturdays. And they're paid, and this is an important piece for those of you doing youth development work, both in the U.S. and perhaps internationally. This is something that a lot of research shows is it's very important that young people are compensated, especially young people who are coming from marginalized neighborhoods, folks who are not historically as privileged. And this is important because one of the founding kind of pillars of this organization is bringing young people together across difference, across racial, class, gender expression, language, geography, and school to be able to come together and work and learn from each other. And so this is important in part because, similar to a lot of urban spaces, definitely in the South, post we started in like 1980s, 90s, the public school system began resegregating after the desegregation, and predominantly African American young people were going to school in Orleans Parish in public schools, and predominantly white young people were going in the surrounding parishes. And that's a generalization, but to say that it is clear that our city, in terms of young people, are very segregated along class and race lines. And so this project was in part trying to address that segregation and bring people together in work and in community. We have 4 pillars. Let me just say one thing about the Advanced Leadership Program there at the bottom. This is in the fall. So the 20-week Spring Leadership Program, which is the core, right now we just graduated 40 young people from that program, and there are some people from that program who might be interested in coming back and leading the next cohort. So we're very conscious that mobility, in addition to being paid, is something that is very motivating for young people. A lot of people are here because they want to be outside. A lot of people are here because it's their first job. A lot of people are here because they want to meet new people and develop, social skills. So we have a variety of different kinds of motivations for being here, and one of them also is young people feeling confident in building their skill sets to then be able to come back. And so this year, for instance, we've had one young person who was in the program for 2 years as an assistant crew leader. This is someone who is done the program and then assists crew leader, who is an adult who leads kind of a group of 10. It's like a smaller family unit. And this is where the work really happens at this smaller unit in terms of the constructive feedback that we give to young people every 2 weeks in this communication model called Real Talk, which is essentially providing regular and intentional communication with young people around what they're doing well and being very specific about that, and areas for improvement, which we call deltas, which in Greek means change. And so framing it in this is I think really useful around sustainable agriculture because it's hard work, right? As we all know, and there's so many questions that come up around food and how we are kind of discussing it. So these regular feedback sessions are very kind of core to what we do. I could go on and on about the program because it's really why this organization exists. And of all the 3 goals I'm discussing, this is the most important one, I believe, for many reasons. But I'll leave it saying that moving forward, we're very conscious around maintaining. I think this is what a lot of people. It's across across domain in terms of our work, whether we're in youth leadership development, market farming, kind of building climate justice movements. Is this question around breadth versus depth and quality versus quantity? And so obviously I think we're all thinking about like how can we scale these kinds of projects if we see success, and how do we maintain the rigor? How do we maintain a relationship-based work culture, which we pride ourselves on, and how do we maintain overall quality while still maximizing and scaling our work? So I don't know if there's an answer to that, but for us, we've found that we've phased and gone slow and done that through in terms of building our budget, our staffing, the young people that we're working with, the agricultural space that we're growing on, and having that kind of be a phased approach. So I'll go to goal 2 and think if you have any questions, maybe just be thinking about those and we can answer those at the end too. So goal 2 is improve access to sustainable produce, especially among low to moderate income individuals. This is the name of the game for accessibility, right? Is we need food that is delicious, healthy, and cheap, or that is at least accessible. And so this is something, as farm manager, I think about it every day, and I think this is one of the real challenges, right, in our food system. And I had the privilege of attending the Food Tank Summit at George Washington in D.C. in January, and one of the conversations that I found myself thinking about and having with a lot of people is how do we create economies in which we are growing food and farmers are being paid well and there's an affordable food base, and that's not the topic of this this webinar, but I feel like that is kind of a parking lot question we have to always keep in our heads. And so at our level, we're trying to hit that sweet spot, and maybe it's never sweet. There's always this tension, I think, around this first market piece, right, is growing, growing for market. And this is important, and we talk about this with the young people because it pays them, basically. This year we grossed a little over $50,000 on an acre and a half, and that's been growing kind of steadily since then. And that essentially covers their salaries for the year. And they're, they take a lot of pride in that. It's like the work that they are doing is helping to pay them, and to make that kind of connection, I think, is very powerful. So throughout our organization, we're trying to maximize what we're able to do to earn as much money as we can, not necessarily in a capitalist hoarding sense, but just to meet our costs, so that we can be less dependent, or perhaps maybe more autonomous from the restrictions and the pressure around foundation funding. And this is something I think nonprofits have to think about in this world where we see, in this funding landscape, of the erosion of a lot of social safety nets, a lot of other kinds of maybe funding streams that used to be there, and more competition. So we're trying to hit on growing food for market, I think, both for a pedagogical reason, because it fits very much into the kind of the young program, the leadership program, and then also to provide more income for our farm. I won't go too much into the ag side of things, because I think most people are familiar with a lot of how different small market farms, organic market farms work. But we have, similar to a lot of other farms, we have a 60-member CSA. Hoping to scale that up in the coming year. The CSA kind of history of CSAs in New Orleans is very recent, unlike other places farms where I've worked on in Southern Oregon or Washington D.C. area. So that's kind of an opportunity that we've been trying to maximize on. We go to farmers market on Saturday, and then we have a farm stand in which CSA members come to pick up. So that's nice. We're not schlepping, doing a lot of that, and young people are going to market, interacting with CSA members, and also operating the farm stand. And then, so that's 40%. And what makes us certainly different than most regular market farms is that we're donating or selling at a reduced cost 40%. One question might be, how are you separating out 40%? And we do it with poundage. And this is if you ask any regular market farmer, like, how many pounds did you grow? And they're like, I don't know. I'm not tracking that. But we're tracking that, and it's not our main indicator, but it's one indicator that funders, we can point to for funders, and it's through yields. This year we're almost done with our harvest. We're going to have grown 17,000 pounds of food. I don't like to talk about that too much because it's not super representative. For instance, you can grow, I don't know, 200 pounds of squash that might not be as calorically nutritious as, I don't know, 50 pounds of collards or something. So, but it is one indicator. So where are we donating in this? And so this is where what I'm talking about is, how do we hit that sweet spot of selling, kind of maximizing our market potential, and then also growing food and legitimately and genuinely increasing food production in the city for working class families. That's a goal that we have, and we are always trying to think, how can we do that better? There are other organizations around the country that we've looked to for inspiration and guidance. Urban Nutrition Initiative, UNI, in Philadelphia is a really cool project that I would suggest people check out. And so how do we do that? We have partnerships with, this year was 9 organizations in which we are donating our produce. But it's not just donation, it's a combination of kind of an exchange we like to think of as where it's providing food, but then also there's kind of a back and forth. So for instance, we have very good relationships with 2 organizations based out of the New Orleans Workers Center for Racial Justice. One is Stand with Dignity, which is a predominantly black, poor poor and working class people's rights organization that is fighting for jobs and career ladders and earmarking for large contract jobs, like there's a new airport being built in New Orleans, and advocating for those jobs to be good paying and prioritized for local people. And then there's an organization called the Congress of Day Laborers, which advocates for immigrant and worker rights. And so these are great organizations that we donate to, we sell at a reduced cost to, and we will do exchanges with curriculum on. For instance, looking into the impacts of the North American Free Trade Agreement, of the inundation of corn and how that impacts immigration, the use of Roundup in Colombia for coca spraying. These are the questions around like Latin America, around kind of globalization issues, and then also with local food chain worker rights campaigns, Fight for 15, and other social justice kind of based work that STAND and the Congresso are working on. These are great opportunities to kind of have kind of cross-pollination or intersections and teach-ins and workshops and visiting each other's projects, because it fits into kind of overlaps with our mutual kind of mission-driven work. I don't have much time left, so I'll kind of go quickly through some of the other pieces, and then we can go to questions. So we also have a volunteer program and an apprentice program that kind of augments young people's labor. Our last goal is to increase knowledge that enhances residents' capacity to make individual choices that lead to healthier communities. That's very kind of grand and gross. But as you can see in this photograph, this is an amazing young woman, Melanie, who was a young person. We call them crew leaders. I'm sorry, crew members. And then she became an intern. Now we call them fellows. And so she's giving a tour. And so this is something that young people are doing a lot of learning public speaking, and through their own work on the farm, also then communicating that to other people. And so in this goal 3, this is kind of like our outreach and kind of public-faced goal. We have a field trip program that's currently suspended, but we're going to start that up again. We're going through we finished a strategic planning process in which we're really trying to think ways where we can hit on these goals and maximize our income and our revenue, our earned revenue production. So field trips, tours, and then what we're calling it says GrowDat Institute, but we're calling it the Hive. And there are a lot of people have approached us kind of like, some of this webinar, it's like, so what do you do? How did you do it? And we realized that certainly we're not the only organization that are doing these things, and so we're not a definitive like consultant on these things, but we do have 5 years under our belt, and there are some opportunities, I think, to do consulting and to help other organizations launch similar projects. And so we're thinking about how we can do that more. Just one thing I wanted to touch on before, is just look up here in the last, or the top left-hand corner where it says all staff, and just to look at, these are kind of some of the bases of what our curriculum looks like. Using popular educational pedagogies to really empower young people to take control of their own learning. Looking at the history of race oppression in the South, the legacy of slavery, and how that connects with food and commodity production in this state and in the region, and how we can make those linkages to how current forms of oppression manifest. And that leads us into this Visions training. Visions is a wonderful organization based out of Boston that does a lot of just really excellent anti-oppression work with different organizations, companies, nonprofits. And we've been working with them for 3 years to really kind of double down on our staff ability to work across and lead young people across difference. And that's something that I feel really grounds our project. And then you can see some of the other pieces that are included in the advanced leadership. This is the fall session. But this all kind of builds into the 4 curriculum pillars that we have that really manifest through the advanced leadership program and then the leadership program in the spring, which are sustainable agriculture, food justice, leadership, and health and wellness. One thing I totally forgot to talk about is, what do young people do? Well, this is kind of an annual calendar you can kind of see, but this is what does a day-to-day kind of scene look like on the farm during the program period. On a Thursday or Friday, young people will arrive here by bus. The public transportation system in New Orleans, like many places, is not as ideal as it could or hopefully will be. And so it would take too much time and effort, I think, for young people to get here. It would be dark by then, too. So we have central pickup places where we hire buses to do that. And it's part of our budget, and we've realized from the beginning, like, we have to do this to make this work. So people come, we have a circle, do a lot of circles, we play a lot of games, and a lot of kind of exercises to not just break the ice, but to really kind of embed values. And then we work. Depending on the day, we'll harvest. We'll, as any good organic farming intern will know, we do a lot of hand weeding and hoe weeding. And then on Saturdays, they'll be there for, so that's Thursday and Friday afternoons, and then Saturdays they'll be there for a full 7 hours. And we work in the mornings, and then usually Saturday afternoons are workshops, cooking classes, nutrition activities, a number of lessons around kind of food justice and inequities in the food system, some of which I mentioned, around farm worker rights, fast food worker rights and justice issues, environmental concepts, very big picture questions around climate change, food affordability, going on a field trip to Whole Foods and then to a corner store and a farmer's market, and just sussing out how the food system landscape looks like and what are some ways that we can we can engage. And I think we could talk all day, so I'll leave it at that, and we can go into questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Leo, and that was a great presentation. We do have another 10 to 15 minutes left to go, so if anyone has questions, please continue to send them using the chat box in your control panel, or once again, you can email them to me, sarah@foodtank.com, but we'll try to get through as many as possible. We have quite a few in already. So I'd like to start by asking you, Leo, 2 questions that I think are pretty similar, so I'm going to group them together. How are young people at Grodat Youth Farm empowered to create positive change as graduates of the program in their communities and beyond? And another very similar question is, how do the skills that young leaders learn in the program apply to life after they graduate?
Yeah, great questions. So the first one, and this is something where it's one of the major kind of what we'll call deltas, areas of improvement, is how are we assisting and maintaining contact and maintaining relationship with alumni. And so we're having some more staff come on this year, which is exciting because part of the new staff's role is to really focus on following up with alumni, most of whom are still in the region, who have graduated from high school. And some of them have come back and worked with us, and that's something that we would like to build out more. And part of the alumni kind of network that we want to build is not just around staying in touch, but really kind of not necessarily with heavy like eval data tracking, but really trying to get a sense of how Grodat has impacted them, and what are ways that we can continue that relationship in terms of helping them with their professional aspirations, whether it's linking them with job resources, with educational resources, resources, connecting them with some of our current work. For instance, we want to be our field trip program and our tour program. I think we feel like we could be a lot more robust, and we want to hire more alumni to help lead those. We want to do more workshops and do visions kind of based, led or trained up on workshops that we want to engage more young people on. And so I think it's always hard, right? I was a high school teacher, and it's always, oh, you want to just keep not helping, but staying in touch and just being a resource for young people you've worked with. So I think that's still a moving target that we're working towards. And in terms of how we are, the skills, right? This is an interesting one, I feel like, because there's these buzz terms now, right, around like hard skills and soft skills, and the hard skills are like manufacturing or typing or something, and then these soft skills, which are learning how to work with your colleagues and listen, and these things which soft kind of connotates that they're not as important, but we really hold those skills up as probably the most important. And so I think we're trying to do more longitudinal data collection around this, and what I can just tell you anecdotally is that the alumni that we have kept in touch with and who come back, and some are very engaged, and they come once a week and like, hey, what's up? And other people we just hear about just through the grapevine every once a year. And when I talk to them, they talk about how GRODAT has, one thing that comes up every time, and it's is that they know how to communicate better in terms of being open and honest, and kind of embodying this concept we have of real talk. And that makes me very optimistic. And it's very small, and we're not uprooting some unjust food system by creating better communicators, but I think there's something powerful about that. So I think there's a lot of other things too, and if whoever asked that question, if you want to call me later or email me, I'm happy to talk more about that. But that's some of the work that we're asking ourselves. Is like, what are we doing? Like, how can we measure the impact better? And I haven't talked much about the eval that we do, but we do evaluation during the program year, and we're trying to do more of that with alumni.
Great, thanks, Leo. And I think actually that leads really well into the next question, which is about some of the metrics and evaluations that you might use for the success both of the youth that are in the program or just the program in general. And so that was the first part of the question. The second is, are you providing also any sort of job placement support, or have you created partnerships within the community with potential employers or different parts of the food supply chain, community organizations, etc.?
Yeah, great question. Can you see this slide?
Yes.
Okay, so I didn't show this because it's it's not boring, but it's these are some of the evaluation tools that we use: a pre and post survey, focus groups, one-on-one interviews, interviews with parents and teachers, and then some other kind of like data tracking things that we have. And we're trying to really build this out. It's hard. I mean, we basically run a school kind of operation, and so trying to hit on all these things has been difficult. We only have right now 5 full-time staff. Our budget is around $800,000. So it's not. I mean, we're a mid-sized organization, maybe small, depending on what your reference point is, but we're trying to hit on those things. In terms of the kind of pipeline for like jobs and other opportunities, we have and we continue to do that. Again, that's like I won't say it's a full-time job, but it's a role that I think we can build out more. Some examples are being in partnership with organizations like Edible Schoolyard. Some of you are familiar with Edible Schoolyard's work in school gardens around the country. For instance, one of our farm fellows who worked for us as a crew member and then came on as a crew leader is now working as a garden manager for them. And so there's some people that are really interested. I'll be honest, it's only probably this is a rough number, like 10 to 15% of young people who go through this program are really excited about continuing with farming or gardening. And that's okay. You know, not everyone is, you know, interested in being a farmer, and that's fine. But there are a number of other people that are interested in the culinary industry, which is a big, you know, thing in New Orleans. There's a lot of schools available for people interested in that, and a number of jobs. And so we're trying to, yes, form relationships with organizations so they're understanding what their rights are as a food worker, and also, you know, chefs to you know, call up and say, hey, we have someone who's going to work with you as well. But so we're trying to, like, not describe ourselves as that pipeline and just kind of a vocation creator. And we're, you know, we don't want to just say, okay, you did a program and then that's it, bye. You know, we want to be able to kind of connect folks with organizations that might be either able to get them an actual job or to connect them with other networks that they would be able to.
Great, thank you, Leo. And then the next question, I think everyone will want to know more about. It's, what are some of the biggest challenges faced by youth at the farm? What are some of the biggest rewards that they receive after the participation in the program, or challenges in working with youth populations from your standpoint?
Yeah, this is a huge one. So I like to think of challenges like on a couple of different levels, just like any problem. There's usually like systemic and kind of more immediate factors that go into those challenges. So I would say the challenge that's constant, that we're always just in a daily way, I think impacted by, young people are impacted by, and the community impacted by, is poverty. So New Orleans, and the things that are connected with poverty. New Orleans, you know, has historically been a low-income city for most of its residents, or many of its residents. So income inequality is very much a conversation, as it should be today, and New Orleans represents that from when this was a colonial kind of outpost, developing as one of the richest cities in the world for certain people during the cotton boom, the oil and gas industry, and now after that kind of fall of that industry are moving elsewhere, like places like Houston. Tourism is the main industry in the Port of New Orleans. And then with Hurricane Katrina, you know, there was a lot of challenges presented, obviously, by that. So to be clear, New Orleans before Katrina was poor for many of its predominantly African American residents, and continues to be. Some neighborhoods came back very well, others did not. And the neighborhoods that are still struggling are, again, predominantly people of color neighborhoods that historically have had limited access to resources. I say all this, why? Because young people are coming from these communities in which making ends meet is a daily challenge, and violence is a very salient issue. One of my students was murdered just 2 days ago, and it reverberates, and we've had people in this community that are not with us anymore, and not just around dying, but just the violence that impacts people and the waves. And so that we try to talk about this, you know, and work it in and have it be a question around, you know, equity and justice, and like what are some of the systemic reasons poverty exists. How does institutional racism intersect with violence, with incarceration, and then linking that with food access? So, I mean, these are big questions, but I feel like these are the systemic issues of poverty, of violence, of racism, are very salient here, of incarceration, especially in Orleans Parish, especially that last one. New Orleans is the highest per capita incarceration capital on the planet. More people, predominantly black young men, are incarcerated here, and the young people that we work with, you know, have to face that. So But that's also to say, there's a diverse mix of race and class. So you have young people that are facing those things also working alongside young people who are very privileged in terms of their race or class privilege. And so those are some interesting challenges, right? Is how you facilitate conversations, work, and conflict resolution across difference. So those are some challenges. And then, I think there's the challenges that we all face as organizers, as educators, is time, money, and trying to really wave flags around these issues. New Orleans in the conversation around climate change. Climate change here is not on the map the way it needs to be. In part, I think, because the oil and gas industry is very powerful. But it needs to be. So I'm seeing short-term challenges, long-term challenges, and things that we're trying to do to address.
Thanks again, Leo. So the next question, I'm going to add a little to it, but it reads:
Sure.
You talked about how the search for human dignity led your decision to start this farm, or the founder to start this farm. What are some specific examples of how dignity has been manifested through this work? And then I'd like to pair that with another question that asks how, you spoke about the diversity in the actual youth that are participating, and how is that group or that cohort then chosen?
Really good question. Maybe I'll do the first one first. Or I'm sorry, the second one first.
Yeah, no problem.
So, young people are. It's a good question. So it's kind of like we unlike like the Food Project in Boston, and I think I might be wrong, but and Urban Roots in Austin, also youth farms, they I believe have like an open enrollment kind of, hey, we're hiring, come to us. For a number of reasons, we don't have that yet. We partner with specific organizations or schools to recruit from those locations for a couple reasons. The first is to really try to recruit across difference, around especially race and class and geography. There's this other thing here, which I'm sure exists elsewhere, is like, we don't want all uptown kids, or all kids living in the East, or because people will kind of click around neighborhoods. So we want to do that across geography. So what we'll do is crew leaders will go into the schools, and then also organizations that are not necessarily just schools, but kind of organizations that they're connected to youth somehow. And we are so we'll recruit in those schools and say, kind of give brief presentations and hand out applications. Whoever submits or fills out an application, a completed application, is invited to an interview day on the farm, where we do a combination of work, games, and one-on-one interviews. And what we're looking for is not the best and brightest, so to speak. What we're looking for is a mix of people, and this is something that it's not. There's no formula, right? So what we're trying to do is, and we've borrowed a lot from the Food Project on this, is trying to identify, and there's not formulaic, but trying to identify through the interviews, through their recommendations, and through maybe a lot of times it's friends of people who are already in the program, a sense of kind of where they're at in terms of like their leadership. And so what we're trying to do is get a mix of young people who, one, are higher achievers, actually, young people who are, that could mean doing great academically, involved a lot in extracurricular type things, but want to really explore this. Have a solid, situation in whatever, like, not necessarily income or anything like that, but more they've got a lot of good things going. And then a group also who is kind of on the opposite spectrum. They're having a hard time. Maybe they've been adjudicated. They're not doing well in school. They might be disconnected from, their school community. And then the other group is kind of in the middle, where they're not on either end of the spectrum. They're not being kind of identified by anyone really for excelling or not doing well in the setup systems that they're born into. And that mix, research shows this as well in other youth leadership projects, is when you and in schools, right, is when you have that mix of income, race, geography, culture, language, and then also just kind of where your skill sets and life experiences and networks are, right? That mix with well-trained facilitators who are sensitive and trained around kind of how to lead across some of this difference, you see some really interesting results. Not to say it's always easy, but that's what we're shooting for. And we're also looking for gender balance, diversity, and trying to hold space as a gender positive and safe space for LGBTQ community and young people. And then dignity. Okay, man, that's such a deep question. Examples. So yeah, Johanna, she's the founder, and I think she just saw a lot of the young people that she was working with just not being done right in the workplaces they were at. Being arbitrarily fired, not making a lot of money, and not gaining like the kinds of skills she felt like were important young people should be gaining. So I think the examples of dignity that I think of, or maybe we should say like dignified work, is crews. So they're divided into crews, right? And there's some like fun competition and camaraderie around the crews, but also there's some real, like some very important relationships across difference that are developed in these kind of smaller family units. And I think I recall a couple weeks ago that two young people, one young man and another young woman, were very different, stations in life. They just were very different people, where they grew up, like color of their skin and all this, and they didn't have very much in common. It appeared at the beginning, and by the end, they initially had some like conflicts, some things going on, and they were just able to work it out, not by themselves always, but kind of with support from their crew leader, and they worked really hard together. And I want, for one of them, it was his first job, and he was very, very proud of that. And for her, it was something that she was used to be doing, like a lot of higher end achieving stuff just on her own. And this is the first time she communicated, I think once, like she feels very proud of doing something in a group. So these are small, in some circles might say like cheesy or whatever kind of examples, but I don't. I think they're real, and I think they're important, and I think they're happening because the workplace is dignified in terms of pay, of treatment, of work, of acknowledging of each other's like feelings and how we're getting along, and so we're trying to create a space that's like safe, healthy, and holistic.
Thanks, Leo. I think that was an amazing answer. We have time for just one more, and I think it'll wrap everything up pretty well. Reads, GrowDat Youth Farm has been a good case study of how to break down barriers and involve more youth in agriculture. And it seems like more of these programs are popping up around the U.S. and the world. So how can we, or are there ways we can all support youth involvement in agriculture in other ways? So through supporting organizations like yours, but maybe also outside of that, voting, purchasing choices, etc.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things we can do, right? I think it starts with like us and our families and our neighbors. I think that's the first place. I mean, that's when anyone asks me like, what are you doing? I'm like, for anything, I'm like, well, first I need to look at myself, and then I look around my family and my neighborhood. For instance, I have almost a 4-year-old, and he comes out here, and we have a garden, and I'm intentional about talking about food, and I have neighbors who don't get to go to farms much, and I'll bring them over. A friend who's on our board, she does an amazing kind of garden program with just her next door neighbors, these kids that they do their homework, they hang out in the garden, they drink lemonade. It's just fun, and I feel like gardening and plants and food are just they're powerful vehicles to not just stay in the realm of horticulture, right? They're really amazing opportunities to break into some of these harder questions that we're dealing with, right, around inequality and major global problems. So I think just interacting with folks around these issues, going, supporting projects that are paying young people. I really believe that young people need. It's so dignifying to have a job, right? I think we all know this, and young people they have tremendous pride in earning money for work that's like done, and with that's done with a high expectation. This is something we talk about. So I'll just say, like, young people here can be hired and they can be fired, and they can be promoted, and there's mobility, and so there's an accountability there. It's also one of redemption. You can be rehired. So I would encourage folks to I don't know, not necessarily find jobs for young people to do in this realm, but find ways where you can support the economic health of organizations that are paying young people. I think that's really important, especially also for the young people that historically are able to do like extracurricular activities that are really awesome tend to be the more privileged ones, right? Because their parents can take them there or pay for it or do the camp or whatever. And historically more marginalized young people are not able to do that as much. And so one of the ways they're able to do it is because they're getting paid. So I really think that that's important. And then lastly, I feel like on the global level, I really believe in young people's giving young people space to be able to voice their ideas, right? A friend of mine who's also on our board, notice that all my friends are on the board. Some of them are. He was talking about young people in Samoa. He was just visiting, where young people are, climate change it's ground zero with sea level rise, and so young people. There's a lot of conversation around how young people are stepping up to talk about this, and I think this is happening all over. I think this could happen definitely more in New Orleans, but I really feel like young people have a very important role to be in the forefront around these discussions. There's an organization here I recommend everyone checking out. It's called Rethink, or Kids Rethink. I think it's rethinkers.org. Johanna, our founder, worked for them for a while. Amazing organization that very authentically youth-led organizing. Authentic, like it's really just well facilitated and done, and it's they had an amazing kind of gathering. I'm looking at the flyer right now on May 4th in the East New Orleans, which has a large Vietnamese community. Trilingual space, Vietnamese, Spanish, and English. It was a Monsanto-free kind of zone day that was talking about the impact of Roundup and the impact that Monsanto has had on our food system. And there were demos created and led by young people across language and geography, and linking that to a campaign. There's just really awesome work. And so this is an example of like young people with support from adults, well-trained and culturally competent adults doing amazing work and taking the lead. And I think this is really important moving forward This is not exactly the work we're doing right now in terms of advocacy, in terms of organizing, but I do feel like we are, I don't want to say we're a training ground for young people like going into the food movement, but I think there's an interesting conversation there, and the more we can support young people to be conscious, to be involved, and kind of working in the realms of food and linking those things to these other justice issues, I think we're doing well.
Thanks, Leo, and unfortunately we're all out of time, but we really appreciate you participating with us today, and thank you to all of our listeners as well for sending in their questions to be able to facilitate this conversation. It was truly a pleasure to have all of you, and I just want to let you know that this recording will be posted on foodtank.com later today. You can follow up with me via email if you have any questions or need any additional information. It's sarah@foodtank.com. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.